So John, why is now the right time to launch these routes? And aren't you a little bit late to the party? There are other carriers who take those routes.
Well, that's exactly why we should do it. I mean, if you look at our history over the last 8 years as we repositioned the company, our first priority was really to rebrand it, reposition it, and take a strong position in the domestic market of Australia, and we did that. Now that we've done that, it's about expanding into some international routes. And for us, quite clearly, the growth for expansion is all about Greater China. Hong Kong was the first step last year with the Melbourne-Hong Kong flights. Yesterday was the second step in that strategy. The third step in some time to come will be actually operating into China. And that's very exciting on a number of fronts. I mean, the first is that quite clearly China is the biggest inbound market to Australia. And not only is it the biggest, with about 1.4 million Chinese visitors visiting Australia last year, but it is also the tourist that spends the most in Australia. So it's good for the Australian economy. It's obviously good for the carriers that fly people to Australia. But once they're in Australia, they also move about domestically, and that's where our strength domestically in terms of network becomes very, very important.
So, John, let me ask you, this repositioning you've talked about, you're now a premium, you're now international, but this is a very, very competitive space. You're up against QF, Qantas, of course, you're up against CX, Cathay Pacific. What is Virgin Australia's, and what's your competitive advantage, do you think?
Yeah, well, look, that's actually a very good point. I mean, the fact is that part of the problem with the Australia-Hong Kong route is that there were only two airlines operating it. And as good as both airlines are, you know, pricing was quite expensive. And I would argue that the service and the product is not as good as ours. So we've come onto the market and said, well, we can provide better service for lower prices. And indeed, since our entry into the Melbourne-Hong Kong market, prices dropped by about 25%. So we've certainly brought competition from a pricing perspective, but if I was to encapsulate our differentiation, if you will, it is that we are, you could call us almost a boutique carrier with high quality at very reasonable prices. If you look at our business class, which has won multiple awards, in fact has been named as the best Australian and Southwest Pacific business class with best crew, that tells you that our quality of service is good, and if you can get that at very competitive prices, I think that's terrific.
Still watching? Perfect. Click here to watch another great video from CNBC International. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.